This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, hi there, ho there. It's Jeff Goodard and welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe birthday boy. And the birthday boy for today, March the 19th, is an iconic defenseman for the Detroit Red Wings. Now, normally I don't do the same sport back to back on a birthday boy / girl, but because I actually was at a crossroads last year with thinking, who should I do? Should I do the one Joe Cap or should I do a hockey player? I went with Joe Cap, but now I'm doing the hockey player. Now he is 56 years old and still living, and unfortunately his career ended in one of the worst ways possible. I'll get to that, but his name is Vladimir Konstantinov. Obviously, hockey fans will know about who he is, but non-hockey fans will not really know that much. But anyhow, he played his entire career with the Red Wings. Anyway, he was in the Soviet Union with CSKA Moscow. The Red Wings took him 221st overall in the 89 draft by the Detroit Red Wings. Of course, Soviet players would be picked late in the draft because of, the Iron Curtain and all that, and communism. Although the end of the Cold War was happening, the Soviet Union still wouldn't allow their young players to leave the country. And the Red Wings would work for 2 years to get Konstantinov over to North America. Konstantinov signed a 25-year commitment in the Army, and if he deserted, he would be a felon, which would make him eligible for work visa in the U.S. He also had a wife and daughter. But fortunately, a Russian journalist actually worked with Executive Vice President of the Wings, Jim Lights, to secure an Army discharge for Konstantinov. With cash from the Red Wings, Mateev bribed doctors to diagnose and confirm Konstantinov had some inoperable cancer and got his medical discharge. Unfortunately, the Soviets would try a coup d'etat attempt to change things. The plan was to get Konstantinov and his family out of Russia in time for training camp in September for Detroit. But there was a problem. With all the airports closed, Matveyev got the family to Hungary. And in Mike Ilitch's private jet, went back to Detroit. His wife and daughter actually did follow a couple days later on a commercial flight, but it didn't matter. The Red Wings looked pretty good and all that. Konstantinov played more aggressively than his Russian contemporaries. Most of them were finesse players, but he was a defenseman. He said, "For my game, I don't need to score the goal. I need someone to start thinking about me and forget about scoring goals." He was known as Flatinator and Flat the Impaler to Red Wing fans. He was part of the Russian Five, a group of 5 Russians who were trying to help the Red Wings break that dreaded Stanley Cup drought that had happened between 1955 and 1997. And of course, helping Scotty Bowman out, who used that type of movement to help the Habs be a thing to behold in the plus 70s. In the 70s. But anyway, it was the Russian Five was a line. 2 defensemen, 3 forwards. The defensemen were Konstantinov and Slava Fetisov, who earlier played for the Devils and all that. And in forwards, Igor Larionov, Sergei Fedorov, Slava Kozlov. I know Larionov played for the Sharks at one time. Fedorov was a rookie in 91, and Slava Kozlov, I don't know if he played for a team before the Red Wings. I'm thinking not. But regardless, Konstantinov was huge and all that. He was a great defenseman. He was making things happen, and he even got the best plus minus in 1996 with a plus 60. Plus minus is basically when you're on the ice and your team scores a goal, you get a +1. When you're on the ice, when your opponent scores, it's a -1. And they do that kind of system. That plus 60 was the highest since 1987, and would be the penultimate start in the 90s and onwards until Johnny Gaudreau had a plus 64 just this past season. Anyway, Konstantinov helped his team to win the Stanley Cup against the Flyers. And he did it job and all that. Flyers head coach Terry Murray actually expected Lindros, Leclerc, and Renberg, the Legion of Doom line, to face Konstantinov on the ice. However, Scotty Bowman actually went with the finesse defense of Nick Lidstrom and Larry Murphy to neutralize Lindros, Lindros's lines forechecking. So Konstantinov was a great defenseman. He was second in the Norris Trophy, or the top defenseman scoring trophy, to Brian Leach, but it was huge. Konstantinov went through a golf outing on June 13th, 1987, 6 days after the Stanley Cup was won by the Red Wings. So Konstantinov with Slava Fetisov and team masseur Sergei Manaskanov, I know I'm probably butchering the name, hired a limousine to drive him home from the golf thing because, they were living together. But the driver, Richard Nida, lost control of the limo and hit a tree on the median of Woodward Avenue in Birmingham, Michigan. The worst part was that the driver had a license suspended because of drunk driving. Are you fucking nuts? How did you not check that out? It wouldn't be the last time a driver made a gigantic mistake in a limousine in 1987. Just saying. Anyway, Konstantinov would have to be in a coma. All that. Slava Fetisov escaped with minor injuries and was able to play the following season. The masseur suffered head injuries as well and spent time in a coma. He had a terrible recovery. So Konstantinov was in a coma and had head injuries and paralysis. It was just terrible what could happen. So the Red Wings felt like they were cursed. They broke a 42-year drought, and then now 6 days later they lost their top defenseman, almost lost another key defenseman, and their masseur because of this bullshit limo crash. But the Red Wings were still in the middle of things and needed to win for Konstantinov and Manaskanov's help. Fortunately, though, the Red Wings did sweep the Caps in the Stanley Cup Finals, and Konstantinov was brought on ice in a wheelchair surrounded by his teammates to celebrate the win. And it was a magical moment and all that. Anyway, the Red Wings still figured he was part of the team, even though Konstantinov couldn't play hockey because of the crash. The Red Wings got special permission from Gary Bettman to put his name on the Stanley Cup in 1988. I mean, Bettman would have been ostracized. Anyway, Konstantinov's number 16 has not been retired by the Red Wings. However, no Red Wing has touched that number since the crash in 97. Patrick Beek, who rarely went without number 16, actually switched to number 15. Brett Hall would be number 16. However, usually was number 16, but he actually switched to 17 and all that. Anyway, the Red Wings kept his locker set up for him, even though he couldn't play hockey. Anyway, his condition has actually impressed a lot of things. While he has trouble speaking and walking, he's been watching Red Wings games from a private box in Detroit. So anyway, Vladdy can't process idealistic feelings about life, the life of the country, or happiness. Everything for him is matter of fact. Konstantinov actually was on the ice at Joe Louis Arena when Steve Yzerman's 19 was retired, helped by Walker. Anyway, he was in attendance for the retirement of Lidstrom's number 5. And in December 2016, the Red Wings celebrated the 20th anniversary of that 97 Cup team. He was there. Konstantinov actually is not really well favored in Canada. And, in 1987, in the brawl at Pierstani, the punch-up at Pierstani, he actually leveled a headbutt against Greg Huggott's nose when the arena lights were off and all that. So, yeah, it was just not the best moment in the world, but it's a moment nonetheless. Konstantinov lives in West Bloomfield, Michigan. Of course, he has to get 24/7 care and all that. His wife and daughter live in Florida, but, it's just shocking. But anyway, yeah. So Konstantinov was huge and all that. Now I know there was that famous documentary E60 did, Unrivaled, about the Avalanche Red Wings thing, and Konstantinov was a major player in it, in the third act, if you will, the limo crash, and they actually interviewed him, and he did okay, and all that in that interview. The whole scope of that interview will, the whole scope of that E60 thing will not be made in this video. There will be another video coming up in about 7 days. In 7 days, I will explain all. But anyway, in his 446 NHL games, when he was able to play from 91 to 97, he scored 47 goals and 174 points, 838 penalty minutes, and in the playoffs, 82 games, 19 points. But yeah, he was huge. Vladimir Konstantinov was going to be the goalie that, the defenseman that would help Detroit out in the future. Maybe a second wheel to Nick Lidstrom, but still, Konstantinov's power and courage should not be dissuaded in any shape or form. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.